I have a reserved opinion about the viability or the reality of time travel. I've interviewed people in my radio career, scientific-minded people, who claim that time travel may be something of the future. But right now, I think it's still in the what if, and in that stage. I don't think anything demonstrable has been done. Personally, I don't think that it exists or is possible, but there are scientific-minded people that do, and I guess the jury will be in when they can actually demonstrate that it can occur.
It is possible to travel in time because if you generate a strong enough magnetic field, that in itself bends space and time, and this can be used to time travel.
But all of this was going on in the 60s and 70s. Dr. John von Neumann, who is generally considered the father of the modern computer, supposedly died in the 50s. Was there a computer technology capable of these remarkable feats back then? Who could have designed such sophisticated hardware and software?
It was alien technology. We simply didn't have the theory, but we had the technical expertise and capability to build the hardware to their specifications. Our government has been working with aliens for years.
Einstein's unified field theory was an attempt to demonstrate that all fundamental forces could be shown in a single basic field. It's been a dream of physicists for most of the 20th century, but it's only recently that the world's physicists have found a theory that is crazy enough to meet the requirement. It's called the superstring theory, and it's far too complicated for most of us to understand. So why bring it up? Only because it is the concept of a unified field that makes things like hyperspace and time travel even remotely possible. And there are those who believe the government did not abandon the research when they closed Montauk.
I don't believe the final chapter on Montauk has yet been written. When I was there in 1992, I saw evidence that the base had been reactivated. New coax cable runs, new power transformers have been put into the power substations, and the radar tower that used to be wide open now has a steel door with double padlocks. And we found other evidence that shows that the base was being reactivated. There were new entrances to the underground with special interlocked doors.
In the past 15 years, I've discovered that I was essentially raised by the government. Perhaps I should say government-designated parents. And I want to tell you there's a lot more going on with these government projects than anybody cares to even think about. It's difficult to explain. It's even difficult for me to comprehend, and I'm living it. I have very clear memories of several different timelines. For example, I was an aircraft and engine mechanic in the Air Force working on jet engines. But when I tried to contact my old Air Force buddies, people that I worked with and partied with, they didn't even know me. I have memories of Montauk, and I believe that Montauk was never really shut down.
Is Al Bielek the sole surviving member of a markedly successful but incredibly tragic experiment? If Montauk was shut down in 1985, did the government just abandon space-time research? Or will the ghost of the Eldridge come back to haunt us again in the 21st century? There is still a huge void between what we know and what we'd like to know. We'll step into the vortex one more time in just a moment. That the Montauk Laboratory existed is not in dispute. It is, in fact, still there today. The project itself, however, appears to have been shut down in the mid-1980s, but then perhaps it wasn't. Could that have merely been a ruse to give them time to rebuild and update the facility? Is it possible that the Phoenix Project, under some other guise and in some other place, is still going on? Are terms like hyperspace, the space-time continuum, and the time travel paradox seriously discussed in clandestine scientific circles, or are they just the stuff science fiction is made of?
You can be sure there's a lot of research taking place in the field of quantum physics and parallel realities and hyperspace. We're not talking about length, width, height, and time here. We're talking about actual parallel reference frames, parallel realities, different dimensions, different universes to us. There is data in theories that suggest we have possibly 21 realities or reference frames wrapped up in the existence we know. There is nothing more important to quantum physicists than studying how all these different reference frames interrelate to each other.
But doesn't this go far beyond the idea of radar or even optical invisibility? Was the Philadelphia experiment a research accident, or was it the means to an end?
Later on, Duncan and some of the others saw the project as pure evil and wanted to destroy it. But Dr. von Neumann, who, by the way, did not die in the 50s, wanted to keep it. He thought that it was a valuable research tool that would be essential in combating what he saw as very serious threats to the security of the United States in the future.
But research into what? And at what cost? Could it be that the Eldridge and its crew were not the only U.S. military personnel to run afoul of the Philadelphia experiment? Some investigators now believe yet another experiment was launched using the same technology, but this time, instead of naval vessels, the subject of the experiment was aircraft. For over 40 years, the disappearance of Flight 19 from a Fort Lauderdale air base in the mid-1940s has been written off as just another of the many Bermuda Triangle anomalies. But now, a German historian and investigative journalist, Michael Priesinger, has uncovered information never before published in the U.S. suggesting a different explanation.
One of my sources, who uses the name Joe Smith, which I'm certain is not his real name, provided me with copies of documents that tell a chilling story. Following the disastrous results aboard the USS Eldridge, the Navy decided to proceed, but with much smaller objects. Their first project would be an attempt to create fog banks that aircraft could slip into following an attack and disappear from view. The Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber was chosen for the first experiment, which was dubbed Burning Glass. But when the equipment arrived at the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, where the experiment was to take place, it was discovered that it was too big to fit in the torpedo bay. It would have to go into the rear gunner's cockpit.
That meant that when the equipment was reconfigured and put aboard the lead aircraft, one crewman would have to be left behind. When the flight took off on December 4th, 1945, Corporal Alan Cosner did not go up. That much, at least, is well established.
The flight had proceeded from Fort Lauderdale to Chicken Shoals and had made their turn for the return when Captain Charles Taylor activated Burning Glass. According to my informant, instead of creating a fog bank, a mini wormhole opened up just ahead of the planes. Within seconds, they were thrown out of time and dimension, vanishing into an infinite eternity.
What could have been the purpose of the Navy's continuing research? The war was over when Flight 19 disappeared. Could it be that the equipment was never designed for creating camouflage at all, but something far more sophisticated? Something that might one day aid in interstellar travel? To the average person, all of this sounds nothing short of preposterous. Someone once said, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Could the government have actually kept all of this under